Hi, everybody. This is Rajan Roos. I'm the founder and CEO of the San Diego Pain Summit, and I'm here with Joletta Belton, who is joining me from her home in Fraser, Colorado. And I just wanted to bring Joletta on because she's been involved with the summit a lot, and she's going to be involved in future events. And I'd really like to talk about some of her background that many of you may not realize, that not only is she an advocate for pain because she's lived with chronic or persistent pain for so long, but she also has a research background. So that's really interesting. So if you want to talk a little bit about your background with this.
Yeah, sure. It's funny because I was just saying the other day, like, who knew that this strange background that I have in like research and then being a firefighter paramedic and then having pain myself would all kind of come together to put me in a place to be able to do the work that I'm doing now. It was interesting because when I was a firefighter paramedic and got hurt and then medically retired, I went back to graduate school in human movement because I wanted to figure out my own pain. And I had a very biomechanical notion of what pain was. So I thought if I could just move better, have better posture, do all of these things, have better biomechanics, then my pain would go away. So that was why I chose human movement for kinesiology.
So it was your pain that inspired you.
It was my pain
to start learning about posture.
To go back to school. Plus, I was a peer fitness trainer for us, so that was just kind of my wheelhouse anyway. I had all the certifications, FMS and TRX sports medicine and kettlebells, like all sorts of things. So I figured human movement kinesiology was a good fit for me. But I chose, my track was sport and exercise psychology. And it kind of brought me back full circle to my education from years and years ago. My undergraduate degree was in psychology as well. And I had a biopsychology emphasis. And I worked in a attention research lab for the last 2 years of my undergraduate education, my junior and senior years. We studied attention in poor college kids who needed the $25 or whatever we paid them to participate in our research. And it was a lot of distraction work with them working on computers, and it was distraction work. But I worked in that human lab for 2 years. And then after my undergraduate school, I went immediately to graduate school at Ohio State University in their neuroscience and psychobiology program. The whole biopsychology, psychobiology thing, I don't know what makes one come before the other.
I was about to ask you, what's biopsychology?
So it's neuroscience. It's essentially neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience. Now the program that I was in is called cognitive neuroscience, not psychobiology. But it was a joint psychobiology or cognitive neuroscience lab, a neuroscience lab. And I worked under Dr. Martin Sarter, who is still a very prolific researcher, who's now based out of the University of Michigan. I just reached out to him actually a couple of weeks ago to let him know that I have totally come full circle and I'm kind of back in the neuroscience world, but from an unexpected angle. But in that work at Ohio State, I was in an animal lab, but still studying attention. So we were studying the cholinergic systems, particularly the role of acetylcholine in the nucleus accumbens. So we did brain surgery on poor little rats, where we inserted probes where we could manipulate the chemicals in the nucleus accumbens. And then we would take the brains out and do, cryogenic slicing of them to make sure that our probes were inserted in the right place. And then we could go and look at the behaviors of the rats during these, which were also attention experiments and distraction experiments. So I was kind of doing the same thing now in rats that I had done with humans as an undergrad. So that was kind of interesting. But that program, my program at Ohio State, I learned so much about the research process because we were doing research every day. I was in the lab 7 days a week, being the newest graduate student. We had to water the rats. Our rats were all water deprived, which I have different feelings about all of this now than I did back then. But I do think that animal research is really important. So I was in the lab 7 days a week, and then also taking a full load of graduate school classes. And a lot of our classes overlapped with the medical school, like our anatomy classes and neuroanatomy classes overlapped with the medical school. But that was where I really learned what rigorous research looks like and how hard rigorous research is to do. I love the big picture of things. I love reading the textbooks of all of the research that is compiled and made sense of and brought together. I don't necessarily love the day-to-day operations of doing the research, because you're always wrong. Like for us, it was always about the null hypotheses and trying to prove ourselves wrong so that we could get that little bit closer to the truth in figuring out how these cholinergic systems were involved in attention, particularly in the nucleus accumbens. So you're looking at this very, very small bit of a very big picture. And it's a very important bit. We need that type of research. But it's grueling, and it's hard work to do, especially knowing going in that you're always going to be wrong, and that's the point of it. You're trying to prove yourself wrong. I did, and this was 20 some years ago, so I had to do all my statistics and everything in an MS-DOS program and print it out on dot matrix printers. So it was even harder back then because they didn't have the tools and things that graduate students have today. You know, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to get to the lab, all of that kind of stuff.
Had to wait for the library to open up before you
yeah. And there was no digital archive of journals or anything like that. So you really did have to go to and you couldn't check journals out. So you had to photocopy, and pay to photocopy articles, or just sit in the library and do all of that research and study. But I did really enjoy it. And I had initiated my own research while I was there in my first year as a graduate student. And I was really successful, but it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing. So took the unusual path of leaving this PhD program. And not only was I in a PhD program, it was paid for. I had a university fellowship for my first year, and then a departmental fellowship guaranteed to me until I graduated with my PhD. And I left to go become a firefighter. So not a typical career path for most people.
How did that happen?
It was something, being a firefighter was something I'd always wanted to do. I had great uncles who were in the Detroit Fire Service, but I was like essentially forbidden from becoming a firefighter. Things were really difficult for the Detroit Fire Department when I was growing up. They had really poor funding. They had equipment that didn't work. It wasn't always safe. So I was steered away from that and became, the first in my immediate family to go to college, and went to graduate school and and I love school. I was a good student. So school is something I've always enjoyed. But being in the lab at Ohio State and being in class all the time, because we were in an animal lab, all of our windows were blacked out. We were in a basement lab with high windows, but they were all blacked out because we would have protesters protesting the use of animals in research. So we literally never saw the sun when we were in the lab. Like it was dark with fluorescent lighting, and that's just not me. I've been camping my whole life. My first camping trip was with my mom and my grandpa when I was still in diapers. And I just missed being outside. I missed working with my hands. I had been an athlete my whole life too, kind of missed that environment of being around teammates and working together. So I moved to Southern California and paid out-of-state tuition to get my associate's degree in fire technology at a community college. So left a PhD program at The Ohio State University to go to community college in Southern California to become a firefighter.
But that's how powerful our environment is, because if you've spent a lot of time outdoors, and I can definitely relate to that, but if you spend a lot of time outdoors and then you spend a lot of time all of a sudden and you're in this box with the fluorescent lighting all day long, that's a very difficult thing to experience when you're used to being outside in nature all the time and being very active. So that's pretty,
Ironically, kind of felt like an animal in a cage, like our poor rats. Like, it affected me too. Like it affected me to a great extent. When I told my advisor, Dr. Sarter, that I was leaving, I joined 3 different softball teams because I just wanted to be outside. I just was going to be gradually, less and less and less over time until I left. I had the time to actually go play some softball. I played on a men's team because I've always been a competitive athlete, and the co-ed teams were just not competitive enough. So I was the only woman in my men's league.
I had another friend, and I went to college for a year, and she was the only woman on the male soccer team because they had no soccer team for women. She was really competitive, and then the following year they created one.
Yeah, we didn't really have, so this was 20 something years ago. We didn't really have very competitive leagues for just women. We had the co-ed leagues, but those were kind of more beer leagues. So yeah, I played on a men's team, and it was fun. I mean, and that type of mentality and part of who I am is also what led me to become a firefighter too. And then in that role, you know, being a firefighter, when I was a firefighter, I went to paramedic school. So I became a firefighter paramedic and worked at really busy stations, but we weren't working at stations that were busy with fires. We ran a lot of medical aids. I worked at a station just outside of a retirement community called Leisure World. I think they've changed the name of it now, but it was a community of something like 60,000 55 and older people. Wow. So the majority of our calls were on medical aids. So really got to see, you know, public health from that perspective. And we ran a lot of calls on people who had chronic conditions or who had pain conditions. And I was one of those firefighters that would bitch about people who were calling 911 for chronic conditions that weren't acute, that weren't emergencies. And it wasn't until my own pain experience and being in the system that I realized how broken our systems are and why people are relying on things like 911 or emergency rooms to handle chronic conditions, particularly pain and breakthrough pain. So my own pain experience definitely gave me different insights into those patients that we used to run on as firefighter paramedics. And also gave me a lot more, I think, compassion and empathy. I always considered myself a compassionate paramedic, but I did have a lot of judgment. You know, I did have a lot of preconceived notions of what pain was, for instance, and, you know, told a lot of firefighters dumb things too, firefighters that were hurt or who were out of shape. You know, if they just did what I did, they just lifted heavy and ran, lived this active lifestyle. You know, I was the paleo CrossFitting, I was that person, and let everybody know about it. If they just did those same things, they wouldn't have any issues. And then all of that came into question when I was dealing with my own pain issues that didn't go away, because I was doing all of those things. You know, I was eating right. I was lifting heavy. I was running. I was active on my days off. I was a gym rat. I was doing all of those things that I thought made you immune to any kind of disease or pain or problems. And I was wrong. So that kind of gave me a different perspective on the whole thing. That lived experience of pain definitely gave me insights that I would have never gained otherwise. So somehow all of that has come together.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, how, so you have this very fascinating background of different experiences and training and education. How do you think you got to where you are today as a patient advocate? Like, how did that start? How did that begin? Because now you're doing, and of course, I want you to share with everyone what you're doing, IASP and the JOPS, J-O-S-P-T. But what was that? What brought you to now you're a patient advocate? You're presenting at all kinds of conferences around the world and the summit. You know, can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, I have no idea. So I just kind of fell into it. So when I went back to graduate school after I got injured, I worked for another 5 months before I went off work. And then it was another year from the time that I went off work to the time I medically retired as a firefighter paramedic. And during that time, you know, I'd had physical therapy and injections, and I had had surgery and more physical therapy and all these treatments that I had kind of failed. But I did not have a very good understanding of what pain was or what I could do about it. And I had these very, solid beliefs that pain meant that it was damage, and that damage was reoccurring because of these biomechanical faults that I had. And that was why I chose human movement, kinesiology to go back to school. But I worked in a civilian position for 2 years before I left the fire department altogether. So my injury happened in 2010, really dark kind of time for 3 years until I medically retired, 3 years to the day of the twinge, after working in a civilian position for a while. I was our wellness and fitness coordinator. So kind of saw the world of movement and health and fitness from that perspective too, as a wellness and fitness coordinator for our entire department of 1,000 firefighters and another, I can't remember how many civilian staff we had, but another 200 at least. When I left the department altogether, it was because of pain, and I could not make the commute because I couldn't sit. So during those 3 years, sitting was my most difficult activity. I couldn't sit. It was so uncomfortable. It was intolerable. It would bring involuntary tears to my eyes. And that not sitting meant, not driving, not meeting friends for coffee or a drink, not going to the movies, not going out to dinner with my husband. My life became really, really small. I went to work and I took the train into work, into my civilian position so that I could stand on the train, which made my commute even longer, but I didn't have to sit as long because I wasn't driving. So all of these things went into me making the decision to leave the department altogether and to go back to graduate school, because I was in all this pain and my life had become so small and I was so kind of just hopeless and despairing because nothing had worked. I'd been in treatment for 3 years. I'd had surgery. I did all of the things, and I was such a diligent patient. I did every single bit of homework I was ever assigned, from my clamshells and my band walks and whatever it was, I did it to the nth degree. I never missed a homework session. I did it all. And I was still in all this debilitating pain. I still did not see a way forward. So I went back to graduate school to try to figure that out. And my degree was in human movement and my emphasis was in sport and exercise psychology. But as a part of our program, we were kind of allowed to pick whatever we wanted for our papers and our discussion points and that sort of thing. So I started studying pain science. And it was such there was so much cognitive dissonance when I was reading the articles about pain science. I was exposed to Lorimer Moseley's work during that time, and it was so different than everything that I had believed and everything that I had been told and everything that was reinforced to me over those 3 years of seeking care and not getting better.
Did that make it more difficult to process the information, or did it make more sense to you than what you thought you believed?
I think both. So it definitely it jived with my experience much more. Like understanding pain as this multi-system kind of protective response made a lot more sense to me than it just being biomechanics, which I had down. I had all the movement stuff down. And what happens when you start focusing so much on biomechanics and posture, your movement actually becomes more limited, less variable, more controlled. I mean, then you're trying to control just everyday movements, from sitting to sleeping to all of these things that become so much work that shouldn't be work at all. So this just made more sense to me, but it was also difficult because pain feels so much like there's something really wrong in there. Like the pain in my hip really felt like there was something really wrong in there. So I would kind of think like, yeah, all of this makes sense for everybody else, but my pain is real. And I had these notions of pain being real meant that it was something that you could find in the tissue. And I think that's a pervasive belief that not just the general public has, but that healthcare practitioners have too. We're still looking for the pain on scans and MRIs and x-rays and trying to correlate what we find on those things to the pain that people is experiencing. And I very much fell into that too. So it was really hard to come around to understanding that pain is very real and it is based in biology, but there's so much more to our biology than our muscles and joints. And that's one of the things that frustrates me now when I see people teaching anatomy and they have the skeleton. Like, we're so much more than a skeleton. That they don't show all the nerves. They don't show the immune system. They don't show our endocrine system, which are all playing a part in our pain experience as well.
And just to go back real quick, when you were learning the pain science and you were talking about So did you feel like it was in a sense telling you that your pain wasn't real when you were first learning it? Is that where that?
No, I thought that it was telling me my pain was real. Like,
Okay.
but I had the reason it was challenging was because I had thought that pain was real only if you could find it somewhere within the body. You know, you could find the lesion, you could find the pathoanatomy that was leading to it. So the challenge was
Okay, I see. I
to
see.
understand pain as real, but in this different way. And I've said before that I feel like it takes time for cognitive shifts, you know, this learning of the material to become behavioral shifts. You know, it allowed me, understanding pain wasn't damage, allowed me to engage with my life a bit more and not worry so much about the pain. And then for those behavioral shifts to become biological shifts. Like, it just takes time for all of that to happen. And it took time for me. I mean, I was in my graduate program for 2 years, and I had a lot of exposure to the information. And that was when, because I had been introduced to Lorimer Moseley's work during that time, we had to interview someone in our field for one of our classes. And I didn't have a field anymore. I was medically retired. I had no idea what the future held for me. I just figured, well, my field is now pain. That's what I'm living every day. So I reached out to Lorimer Moseley to see if he would be okay with having an interview by me for my school project. And somehow he said yes. And I grilled him for 45 minutes on pain science, still looking for that one fix, that one nugget, that one thing that I could do that would fix everything. And just had a really wonderful conversation with him where it was really the impetus for me changing my approach to my pain in my life after having that talk with him. And at the end of that talk, he had told me that he was going to be the keynote presenter at the San Diego Pain Summit. And so I immediately looked up what that was and signed up for it. Yeah, immediately, like probably within the hour after getting off Skype with him, I signed up for the San Diego Pain Summit. So, and through that process too, in that figuring out how I ended up here. So I went because I wanted to meet him, and then I was exposed to all of these other people in the world of pain science too, and I felt so validated in that environment, you know, being around all of these clinicians and researchers who understood pain the same way that I was beginning to understand pain, who could kind of give me permission to do the things that I thought would help, because I wasn't getting that from like my traditional healthcare experiences. And it's so important for clinicians to know that we need that permission. Like we can't do this on our own. We can't figure out, you know, we can't connect all of these dots on our own. We can't figure out that path forward on our own. We need people to help guide us and to give us permission to engage with our life and engage in the things that are meaningful and valuable to us. And we need to have an understanding of why that's beneficial and how it's not harmful. Because if you believe that every time you're feeling more pain, you're doing more harm to yourself or more damage is being done, it's really, really hard to engage with your life. So getting that permission from SDPS that first year was really life-changing for me. And I had written a blog post about it. I think my first blog post I ever wrote about a San Diego Pain Summit was called Permission to Exit, it was about permission to exit like the holding pattern that we're in when we're in pain. It's like you can't engage with your life. You're just in this holding pattern above it until the pain gets figured out and the pain gets fixed. Then you feel like you can get back to living. And through Lorimer Moseley's work and through going to that first San Diego Pain Summit, I learned that I didn't have to wait. I didn't have to be in that holding pattern anymore, that I could get back to my life and get back to living, even if pain was still present. And that was life-changing. You know, that meant that I could live my life again. And I wanted other people to be able to live their lives again too, who were living with pain. And I wanted to figure out ways of making that happen. I mean, my blog wasn't really started to do that. It was really to make sense of my own experiences and make sense of what I was learning through my education and learning from my lived experience and the things that I was trying and the things that I was doing, and then reflecting back on what happened. And then people started engaging with me through that blog and saying, like, you're telling my story. Like you're saying your blog post is exactly what my thoughts have been. I was so shocked to get those messages and those emails, because it felt so personal, and it felt like no one else could possibly understand what I was trying to say. And then to hear from so many people that not only did they understand it, but they were living it too. Like, it just made me want to do it more, and to make sense of pain for myself and for others, and share what I was learning for myself, because it might help others to help make sense of their own experiences. None of our stories were identical, but there's so much in each of our stories that we can all relate to. And so I kept writing the blog, and I kept going to the San Diego Pain Summit, and I kept interacting with the clinicians that I met there, like Jason Silvernail and Sandy Hilton and Sarah Haig, like all of these people Keith Waldron, all the Keiths, Steve McCarroll, all these people who became a part of like my support system and my ability to continue to make sense of things, and have people to bounce ideas off of, and people who supported and encouraged me in that, even though I was coming at it from a patient perspective. And that's not a typical thing for all of those clinicians to support me in those efforts was huge. And it's what's allowed me to have the platform that I had, because I had these good relationships with people who were treating people who live with pain, who research pain. And all of that just kind of came together into doing what I'm doing now. It was never planned. It all just kind of laid itself out before me. Part of it too, like that, really wanting other people to be able to exit that holding pattern that pain has put them in, that they're not engaging with their lives, is what led me to co-found our nonprofit, the Endless Possibilities Initiative, too, with my friend Beth, because her development coach at the National Sports Center for the Disabled, where I was a volunteer, and she's an athlete. She's now a volunteer coach. But meeting her after she's paraplegic, after a failed surgery that was supposed to fix her pain, which actually made her more paralyzed and gave her more pain, her development coach introduced us, because I had been talking to him about pain at a shoe store, because I just talk about pain to everybody.
You're a talker.
I'm a talker. And sharing what I had learned with her, she kept saying, like, why hasn't anyone told me this before? And that was really when I realized, because I kept thinking that when I was in school, why hasn't anyone told me this before? Like, there has to be mechanisms for people to get this information that aren't just reliant on them hearing it from their healthcare provider. Because a lot of healthcare providers don't have this information either. I mean, their educational systems aren't set up for them to understand chronic pain well. And it's a huge disservice to them as well, because then they're put into situations where they're having to work with patients that they don't understand. They don't understand how this pain experience is not resolving for them based on what they learned in school. So there's so much change that needs to take place from, just what healthcare professionals are taught when they're in school, even as undergrads, what all of us are taught.
But you're doing a lot as well. I mean, tell us about the IAS, the International Association for the Study of Pain. You're on a task force now. What is that?
Yeah, so it's really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to where things are going to go from this. But at the World Congress in Boston last year, we kind of kicked off this Global Patient Alliance. We had our first meeting in Boston and started to establish kind of a framework for what this could look like going forward. And it's a global alliance of patients and advocates to really kind of change the way we understand pain, and change the way research is done, change the way we provide education and resources. And this year now, we're establishing a task force, which is just now in the works. Like this week is the finalization of who all those task force members are going to be. But it's a presidential task force for the International Association for the Study of Pain to kind of establish this global patient alliance and advocacy efforts. We're going to be involved in the World Congress in Amsterdam again next year, where we're going to be integrating the patient voice and patient perspectives throughout the Congress. And then we're going to be doing some work on, helping people who are living with pain, helping people who are advocates for people living with pain to get involved and to have that all under kind of a global umbrella, so that we all know what everyone is doing, because people are doing wonderful work in this area. We're just not all together under one umbrella yet. We're not all connected. And I think that will be one of the biggest things that come out of this is figuring out from all of these multiple perspectives, from a global perspective. There's task force members from all around the world, and half the task force is people living with pain and advocates, and half are clinicians and researchers. So my co-chair is a pain medicine consultant out of Scotland, Blair Smith. And those bringing together, you know, the clinicians and the researchers and the patients and the advocates to start having these conversations is going to be monumental, I think. And it can really change the way that we think about how research is done and what questions we're answering. What are the relevant outcomes to patients? What are the questions that we need to be asking and answering to really understand not only what pain is, but what we can do about it. And of course, my particular bias is going to be how can we best empower patients throughout the world who are living with pain to live well. That's always going to be my bias and my bent, because we can live well with pain. And I think that's so important to know, because for some people, pain isn't going to resolve. And if it does, that's fantastic. And they already have the living well part down. We need to help people to live well within their current situation. If that current situation involves pain, they deserve to live a good life with that pain. So that's my huge bent for that. And there's all kinds of other initiatives going on too. The Journal of Orthopedic Sports and Physical Therapy, JOSPT, has.
What are you doing with that one?
So I'm now on the editorial board for them, and my official title is a special features editor for patient and public partnerships. So we just had our first editorial go out just a couple of days ago, like September 1st, I think it was launched. And it was called Partnering with Patients in Research. It's the right thing to do. So it's an effort towards incorporating patient perspectives into research from the genesis of that research all the way through the process. And we're going to be developing resources and guidelines and materials for researchers to know how to do that. And there's a lot of resources already out there that we're going to try to compile to help people make that happen. And it's already being done. Patients are already being included in research in a wide variety of research applications throughout the medical spectrum, healthcare spectrum. So we're just making it more explicit and trying to drive some change within the journal so that researchers are thinking about this. And, you know, patients have so much to offer from their lived experience, their expertise in living with these conditions. And for JOSPT, you know, it's athletes and patients who are living with musculoskeletal conditions, who have experienced injuries, who are living with pain. There's so many different areas of study where patients and athletes can contribute to what questions we should be asking and answering and what paths forward can look like. Like, one of the things that I always ask clinicians that think that something worked for their patient for such and such reason is, well, have you asked the patient what they thought worked and why? And often they haven't. And then when they do, they're surprised at the answer. So I think we need to start having more of those conversations, because if what patients are experiencing in research or in clinical care is different than what the clinicians and the researchers think, that's something that we need to know and explore and find out more about, because we might then hit upon better ways forward in treatment. So I'm excited about all of those opportunities as well.
That's actually pretty incredible. Is that all that you have coming up? Are you on any other boards or task forces? Or?
No, those are the only boards and task forces. I am working with Retraining Foundation now too, though. So that's
talk about that tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started with Retrain Pain a couple of months ago. Alon brought me on to kind of co-instruct his certification for healthcare professionals course, which has been wonderful, because there's people from the whole spectrum of healthcare professions from all over the world that take this course. That it's a 16-week course, and each week there are reflection questions on the course material. So I get to see all of those reflections and interact with the people who are taking the course, and I'm learning so much from their experiences as well. And it's everyone from, you know, massage therapists and physical therapists and occupational therapists and physicians who are tertiary care and physicians who are interventionalists, like that, the whole spectrum of physicians who work with people in pain as well. It's just been a really wonderful experience. And we're going to be developing more courses and resources for both people living with pain and for clinicians through those efforts too. So that's been really exciting.
Is it retrainpain.com?
Retrainpain.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyone listening can go to retrainpain.org to check up on their next series of classes, because I've heard a lot of good things about that program.
Alon has done an amazing job at putting together all of this research and not just compiling it, but being able to put it together in a way that makes sense for people that they can actually use in practice. And the feedback that we get is pretty wonderful. And we're constantly tweaking it to make it better based on the feedback that we get from people taking the class too. So that's my other exciting thing. And still doing stuff with EPIC too. I have a firefighter workshop coming up next week down in Denver where, and this is cool because it's going to be for firefighters who are having, persistent pain issues, and then also their healthcare team.
Wow.
They have an in-house healthcare team of 8 that take care of this South Metro fire. And it includes athletic trainers, physical therapists, I think occupational therapists, maybe an MD. So it'll be for everybody to kind of talk about,
So the firefighters who are the patients, they're bringing in people who are on their team to also.
So they have an in-house team for the fire department.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the 750 firefighters are all treated by this same in-house team for health and wellness, and then rehab, like work comp rehab and that kind of stuff. So that healthcare team and firefighters that are dealing with some persisting pain will be there.
I actually like that format. The healthcare team themselves joining their patients
Isn't that awesome?
And that is really cool.
I'm pretty stoked. And this was their idea, not mine. So
that's what healthcare should look like in general, right?
Yeah, I think so. So I'm so stoked that they asked. They actually had a firefighter come to our firefighter retreat back in October last year. And he thought that it would be really beneficial for others in the department to go through as well. So just really grateful for the opportunity, and that this is what they want. Like, I just feel like so much can be driven from what small groups of people want. We can change the way that healthcare is done. But they're going to be changing within their small segment the way that healthcare is done there, and that can spread to other departments, to other, work comp providers, to other healthcare providers. And that's the kind of change that really excites me, that kind of ground up change.
Well, cool. So I just want to, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm just going to mention just a couple things here at the end. But I'm really looking forward to hearing your and Keith Meldrum's presentation at the 2020 San Diego Summit here in San Diego. And it's going to be interactive and interesting. But I just wanted to make the very small announcement that you, or Joletta and Keith, are going to be teaching a 2-day workshop at the SD Pain East, which is going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina on October. What were the dates we decided?
20-something for something else.
I think it's the 22nd and 23rd.
That sounds right.
The whole week is the 20th through the 25th. And then I think you guys are teaching. But so I'm just really excited about, a workshop based strictly on the patient experience. I think that's going to be really, really cool. And then also with your background, with everything else that you're doing, which is it's just a very interesting background. And I really appreciate you coming on here to share your journey, and what you're doing in the future is just great.
Thank you. Who knew that my particular blend of introversion, bookishness, science geekery, firefighting, fitness would all come together to create something meaningful for this work. So it's kind of cool. And I'm so excited to do these things with Keith, who is another amazing human who many people who are watching probably know of him as well, and all the work that he's done in British Columbia and for Pain BC. And he's become a really powerful voice in the pain and advocacy world. So excited to do some stuff with him.
So just before we leave off, is there any resources that you would recommend in case anyone's watching who would like to send their patients maybe somewhere to start learning about this stuff that's very patient centered, or if there are people who are in pain themselves who maybe they don't feel like they're getting help from their practitioners, are there any resources you would besides your blog, which is called My Cup of Joe, is mycupofjoe.com, right? I think your blog is excellent.
Thank you.
Are there any others that you would recommend for?
Yeah, so retrainpain.org are on the landing page. There's patient modules or modules for people who are living with pain, and they're quick, like 1-minute modules to kind of dive in a little bit into the science, and then also how you can use that to start to change your experience. Pain BC has a website called Live Plan B, like BE, .ca. That's an amazing resource as well. Some San Diego Pain people were part of the construction of that. I think both Bronnie and Neil Pearson were part of the development of that. And that has educational resources in forms of like articles and videos, and then also has some like management tools or planning tools to be able to live well with pain. I love tamethebeast.org, I believe it is, which is Lorimer Mosley's effort with a grad student who, unfortunately, I always remember or forget his name. But that video I love, and they're starting to add more resources to that as well. Lysanthea's Pain Chats is a good resource as well, and that's continuing to grow, and more clinicians and patients are writing material for that site too. A lot of San Diego Pain Summit folks are contributing to that as well. And I know there's more. On our site for EPIC Colorado, epicolorado.org, there is a resources page that has a ton of resources listed, and it's separated from patients to educational resources for clinicians, like more practical clinical applications.
Okay, and I'll put all the links on this under this post, wherever I post it. People don't have to write it down. But thank you again so much, Joe, for your time. I really appreciate it, and it was really fascinating listening to your story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and it's so good to see you.
You too.